The thought of nuclear warheads on a missile or a bomb or any of this is really, really scary because technically it can end the world, right? That's always a real world scenario that we think about. But what if there was an anomalous nuclear missile? Wouldn't that be crazy? SCP Exposed is actually going to cover one for us. It's SCP-1178, and we're going to react to it today. Make sure to check out SCP Exposed, guys, and let's get into this reaction.
Russian Special Agent Dmitry Ivanov had just arrived at the government facility in Moscow where he worked.
Okay.
He showed his identification to the officer at the gate and placed his finger on the scanner.
Right.
Only agents with high clearance were able to enter the building. The scanner read his fingerprint and activated the door to open. As he walked towards his office, he wondered how he had managed to end up in such a boring job. When he became a special agent for the Russian government, he thought he would be leading an exciting, dangerous life.
But
But
you're pushing
instead,
pencils
all
and
he
papers
did was
most of the
sit in front of
time.
a blank computer screen every night. Nothing exciting ever happened here. Sometimes he wished another country would launch an attack just to give him something to do.
Oh my
His job was
god,
to
that's
watch
pretty
out for any
selfish.
possible threat to Russian security, especially
Sure.
from the United States.
Okay.
But for years now, the relationship between the two countries had been amicable.
Yeah.
The leaders of the two countries even went on holidays together.
Yeah.
He went into his office. His colleague, Sergei, looked up at him. "All quiet as usual," he
Yeah.
said. Sergei and Dmitry spoke for a little while longer before Sergei left to go home. Dmitry took up his position in front of the
Boring.
computer. He tapped in his password to signal that he had taken over for Sergei. He
Uh-huh.
would be spending the next 8 hours sitting, looking at his desk.
Bruh.
It was
Those
difficult to stay
shifts
focused
suck.
when looking at an empty screen,
Because they're so
and
boring
it
and it
wasn't
goes so
long
slow,
before
you know?
Dmitry felt his eyes closing.
I couldn't
He
do
got up to make
surveillance
himself a
work
coffee. He
either.
needed something to help him stay awake.
Sure.
He sat down at his desk once again, but it wasn't long before he was yawning. He could hardly keep his eyes open. He decided there
It's
wouldn't be
espresso,
any harm
man.
in having just a few minutes sleep.
Uh-oh.
He closed his eyes and settled back in his chair. Suddenly,
That's when it
Dmitry
happens.
was jolted awake by a siren screaming loudly. He jumped up, panic rose up inside him, and his heart was beating madly. Lights were flashing everywhere. This
So
couldn't be
apparently we picked up the
Dmitry
thread.
looked at the
You
computer
asked for it,
screen.
dude.
3 words written in bold red letters were flashing across
Possible
the screen.
nuclear attack.
attack.
Holy
Dmitry
crap.
had to make a decision fast.
Can you imagine?
Whether to activate Russia's own nuclear weapon and aim it towards the United States,
No!
knowing that it would kill millions of people, or to wait and risk himself and his own citizens being destroyed. Dmitry pressed the big red button that
Wow.
would activate the launch of Russia's own nuclear missile.
Bruh.
Welcome back to SCP Exposed. Before I go on, please make sure you
That's
subscribe
crazy
to the
to
channel
even
so you don't
think
miss out
about,
on
man.
any creepy SCP stories.
I couldn't do
Today,
it, y'all.
we bring
I
you
couldn't
Peter
be
class object
responsible for that many lives.
SCP-1178. SCP-1178 is a
Crazy to
Soviet-era
think about.
RT-2 Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, whose NATO reporting name is SS-5 Skean.
Okay.
It was manufactured sometime between 1962 and 1967.
Old school.
It is suspended exactly 1.34 kilometers in the air above a former Soviet missile base.
All right.
Its rockets will activate intermittently. However, it has never been observed to move outside of breach events. If any vehicle or mammalian organism approaches it from a distance of 200 kilometers or less, or if a broadcast contrary to those created by the Foundation is made in its range, it will begin to slowly accelerate itself from its position above the base.
Okay.
It moves very slowly, with the highest speed ever obtained being an estimated 1.6 kilometers per hour, achieved
How
during its initial
weird.
activation event.
That's so
Its
slow.
acceleration is to be considered a breach event, as it will cause SCP-1178's secondary effect to initiate.
Which
The
is?
initiation of Aprecia protocol must be done within 3 minutes of its acceleration in order to be effective.
Okay.
The Aprecia protocol calls for sleeper agents within nuclear detection organizations in various NATO and former Soviet states to sabotage the early detection systems of the countries they are working for. This is to create a plausible explanation for why these systems showed false readings.
Okay.
Once this has been achieved, personnel are to ignore or cast doubt on any recordings
That's all to
detected
keep
by
it
equipment
contained.
affected by SCP-1178. In the event that one nation launches a nuclear attack, the response systems of the recipient nation or nations are authorized to be disabled by Foundation agents to minimize the damage created by a nuclear strike and avert
Oh my
an X-case
God,
scenario.
Right.
SCP-1178's secondary effect will initiate in the event that the missile is able to accelerate to a speed greater than 0.2 kilometers per hour. the early nuclear detection system of any former Soviet state will begin to
So
indicate
slow.
an imminent nuclear strike. Starting with radar stations, all equipment possessed by these nations will begin indicating a massive nuclear strike coming from any nuclear-capable NATO nation.
Just triggers
When these states
everybody's
have gone on
nukes.
alert for the possibility of a nuclear strike,
Nuke
the equipment of any nuclear-capable NATO nations will also begin to indicate an
Right.
imminent nuclear strike from any country currently affected by SCP-1178.
Got you.
Note that it will only affect the early detection
So
equipment
the
of these
threat
countries
is not
and does
actually the
affect
missile,
actual
it's
launch
the-
devices or the commanders in
It's
charge of said
making
devices.
the
SCP-1178
the
is
alerts
currently
go
being
off.
kept in a
That's the
special
biggest threat,
containment
right?
area. An area of exclusion has been created around its active area. Any human or vehicle entering this area is to be immediately terminated or destroyed. Security personnel patrolling this area from the ground must maintain a state of radio silence at all times. Aircraft patrolling the area must never move closer than 2 kilometers to its area of exclusion.
All right.
Observational equipment must predate 1938 and be constantly manned by Foundation personnel. If it shows any signs of movement towards the
1938?
perimeter, it is to be considered a containment breach and a
Gotcha.
possible apocalyptic scenario.
Oh my gosh.
Loudspeaker units set up around
So
it
this
must
particular
constantly
missile
create broadcasts
can
of
be
varying
a
nature,
threat.
such
Okay.
as fabricated news reports of limited nuclear war between NATO states that possess nuclear armaments and the Soviet Union
How
and the
weird,
People's
dude.
Republic of China.
And how
In
dangerous
addition,
too.
there are to be reports indicating that the Midwestern United States has been devastated in a relational strike and that the U.S. Army has invaded the Kamchatka Peninsula. False broadcasts must be transmitted indicating troop movement and communications in the Soviet and United States armed forces.
Okay.
There will also be false civilian broadcasts corresponding to those events.
Right.
False witness accounts will be broadcast too. There will be television signals for programs between 1962 and 1981 in the Soviet Union and advertisements for consumer products such as gas masks, radiation suits, and firearms capable of being used by a child or parent will be displayed.
What the heck?
All these actions will trick it into thinking that a war is actually taking place. This is essential because the instant it doesn't
Strange.
perceive a nuclear war is going on between NATO forces and the Soviet Union, it will leave and try to trigger one. Strong winds will not affect it. Birds are not deemed a risk factor
That's
because
the thing.
as they are not blind to a solid object in the sky,
Right.
they will circumnavigate it. No other native animal life will trigger it. In the event that SCP-1178 begins to accelerate, all personnel are to initiate the Prisia Protocol.
Right.
In the event of a Prisia
How
Protocol failure,
crazy,
Overwatch
man.
Command is to be set on high alert for the imminent possibility of an end-of-the-world scenario. Previously, an incident occurred which caused it to launch. It was
Okay.
reported as a test by the Soviet Union. During
Right.
the launch, GRU Division P reports say that SCP-1178 ceased to accelerate and unexpectedly detonated once it reached a height of 1.33 kilometers.
Wow.
At the same time, early warning nuclear detection equipment in the USSR began
Sure.
to display an imminent nuclear strike by the US. It is not known why the USSR did not retaliate in response to these readings.
Huh.
Approximately
Maybe because
6
it knew?
days after the incident occurred, the GRU evacuated and then demolished the base and established a permanent observation center.
Sure.
Recovered records indicate that it was launched at an object present in the atmosphere over Siberia, but the appearance and properties of this object are unknown, as all information on the
Strange.
object was destroyed in 1991.
So maybe it was put
After an
together
unknown period
to
of time, it
assess
began
a threat
affecting
that
the
we don't
area
know
around
about.
the base, leading to its second activation event. Following this event, the area of exclusion that currently exists around it was established.
Right.
During the Cuban Missile Crisis, GRU personnel began broadcasting the signals currently used by SCP personnel to contain SCP-1178.
Huh.
It is believed that research with it had led them to create an elaborate post-war hoax in order to keep it pacified. Research notes
Weird,
recovered from the GRU
dude.
theorize that SCP-1178's only motivation to activate was to irradiate the Earth through nuclear war, and if such a war had already occurred, it
Wow.
would remain inert until another civilization capable of conducting a nuclear war arose. What do you think?
So was the missile actually created for this purpose? Or did it just pick up the anomalous properties? Such a freaking weird one, man. But dangerous as heck, right? Holy crap, y'all. SCP Exposed. Make sure to check them out, you guys, as well as a couple other reaction videos that I've done about them. Thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Zueljin signing off. We'll see you next time.
Break it down.